By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes.
I've always considered myself to be a calm, rational and logical person, and I was always on the fence when it came to the paranormal. That is, until this day. It's autumn time, and I'm driving to go and pick up my girlfriend to get some food. I will never forget glancing down at the clock to notice that the time was 8:30 p.m, and so the sun was beginning to set. I go and I've picked her up. For some unknown reason though, I stupidly decide to take a shortcut and drive through a notoriously haunted road. This road is situated exactly between a huge cemetery and a crematorium. I personally know 2 people that have died in a car crash here. However, I have actually been down this road many times over the years, and I've never experienced anything, even remotely paranormal myself, until now. Now bear in mind that these 2 adjoined long stretches of roads, Park Lane and Forge Lane, used to be national speed limit roads, which means that in the UK, you're legal to drive up to speeds of 60 miles per hour. It's been changed and lowered since. Therefore, that should make you aware that I'm completely focused, alert, and have my wits about me. Also bear in mind this. These roads have absolutely no streetlights. The only form of lights are the cat eyes that are built into the road, which reflect car lights so that it reflects and shows the path. Oh, another thing to note is that there are no sidewalks on this road. I'm cautiously driving at a high speed, to which I am fully aware of my surroundings and am 100% stone cold sober. We continue moving along and end up quickly reaching over halfway of these 2 connected roads. This is a point where the trees surrounding each side of the road kind of form into a sort of tunnel, which only manage to add to the eeriness. As I'm driving along, I suddenly notice a distant figure up ahead, around 50 to 100 yards. He sort of just happened to be there, from seemingly nowhere. So, as any sane driver would do when they see a person standing in the middle of the road, I instinctively took my foot off the gas, until I realized something. There are no sidewalks for pedestrians to walk on, and it's a 60 mile per hour road. My mind instantly began to go into overload. I started to go through hundreds of questions in my head. An absolute flood of emotions and sense of dread crept in. But I remind myself that I need to remain calm, driving on this very dangerous, unlit road. As I get closer and closer, to within less than 50 yards, I can finally make out a bit more detail. It's now that my emotions really start to run wild. My hands are shaking, tears are streaming down my face, and I'm beginning to sweat profusely. All of this because I'm slowly coming to terms with what is in front of me. I see a brown-robed figure, no face, no feet. Then, almost as if he sensed that I was coming closer, he literally drifts to the side of the road, into some nearby bushes, and then just completely vanishes. I barely maintained my composure long enough to finish driving to the end of the road, where I managed to park up. I was speechless. My face had gone so pale and I was completely drenched in sweat, with tears still coming out of my eyes. I sat there for a full 10 minutes, just trying my hardest to debunk and comprehend what I had just seen. But the truth was that there were no streetlights that could have somehow caused a visual misinterpretation. There were no paths for a random person to enter this section of road. No other sort of interference from other external sources, and no headlights from any cars coming in the opposite direction whatsoever. My mind was going crazy. It was racing through so many different scenarios as to what I had witnessed. It was just in complete overdrive. But after what seemed like an eternity, I eventually began to process in my mind that the only thing I could come up with was that I had just witnessed a full-body apparition of a brown-robed Benedictine monk. And do you know what the funniest thing about all this was? My girlfriend was there for the whole journey, but she had her head down and was looking at her mobile phone the whole time. The whole experience ended up having such an impact on me that I began to do some background research into the area. Sometime later on, I managed to discover two very specific details about the area. One, an actual monastery used to exist there back in the 12th to 13th century. And two, I found a website dedicated to my city. Just a generic website about the history of the city. However, I managed to find a thread. It was about the ghost locations in and around it. And after browsing through some 12 pages within it, I finally find a comment by someone that also mentions seeing a brown-robed monk.
In 2009, I moved into my boyfriend's house, a seemingly normal 3-bed terrace in Leeds, UK. After a few weeks, a radio that was built into the kitchen started playing on its own. The radio was really old and no one used it since we all had iPods with speakers at the time, so we thought it was really weird and went and turned it off. But it kept coming back on. We thought it might be faulty, so we pulled the wire from it. But a few days later, it was on again. But just that white noise kind of sound, really loud. No one else had been near it, as it was just me and my boyfriend in the other room. It really freaked me out, so we took it out of the kitchen and threw it away. After that, I started to feel uneasy, like I was being watched, and like something moved out of the corner of my eye when no one was there. One day, I had just gotten out of the shower, and I was sat at the dresser doing my hair and makeup, and I saw a full shadow person, just all black, but a definite human shape, stood there behind me. But they were where the bed is. So they were going through the bed. I screamed my head off. My boyfriend didn't believe me. But then, I started seeing the shadows person, or people, a lot. And then one time my boyfriend was going down the stairs, and he saw it dart across the bottom of the stairs into the kitchen. It freaked us both out that we were both seeing the same stuff, so it wasn't just our imagination. My cat would act weirdly, looking at things, chasing things, and weirdly she would attack my face at nighttime, out of nowhere. Which may be unrelated, but I have a feeling that it wasn't. But I don't know. The scariest, loudest thing happened to me and my boyfriend when we were home alone and sat watching TV, with the door to the living room shut. This door led to the hallway, and then out to the front door. All of a sudden, there was the biggest bang against the back of the door from the hallway. My boyfriend jumped up thinking we were being broken into and swung the door open. But there was no one there, other than the dog's tennis ball rolling away from the door. We checked the house to see if someone was hiding or tricking us, but there was no one. We checked the front door in case someone opened it and threw the ball in, but it was locked from the inside, with the keys still in it. I was so scared, but we were moving out in a couple of months, into our own place, so I tried to just put up with it. I started having terrible nightmares, and my boyfriend would wake up to me screaming and have to hold me until I could calm down and go back to sleep. But I never could remember whatever the nightmare was. There were other weird things that happened, like in the living room there was this big double window, and one day, this massive shadow had just floated in front of the whole window. The living room got darker, and I thought it was a plane really low about to crash there. But there was nothing. And lastly, I was sat on the laptop using the webcam when a dark brown, almost liquid-looking thing/shadow started in the top right corner and started moving across the screen, almost eating it up towards my face. I screamed and slammed the laptop shut, but my boyfriend opened it, and there was nothing there, and it never happened again. That could have been a malfunction, but me and my boyfriend have never seen anything like that before or since, and we had that laptop for 2 years after that. When we moved into our new place, the nightmares stopped, and the cat stopped attacking my face, and we felt a lot lighter. We both talk about it sometimes, years later, and remember everything clearly still.
My mother and 2 older brothers would visit my auntie and 3 cousins around Christmas. The whole family would get together too. Uncles, aunties, you name it. Anyway, they lived up near Inverness in Scotland, in a place called the Black Isle. It's actually in a place called Cromarty, but Inverness is more well known, so I'll say that. The Black Isle was said to be used back in the day as a place where witches would meet up on Halloween and perform rituals, animal sacrifices, that sort of thing. Whether or not that is true is another story. I'll get to the story now. We all rented out a holiday home just down the road from my cousin's house. It had multiple bedrooms in it, so perfect for a lot of guests. Me, one of my older brothers and his friend from Africa were all staying in one room. They were fast asleep. I, however, was not. I woke suddenly, and I didn't know why. I scanned the room with my bleary eyes, and it was very dark. I couldn't hear anything but the snores from my brother and his friend. The door to the room slowly opened with a creak. I froze with fear. I didn't see anything enter through it, but as I tried to scan my eyes around the room, I started to see shadow-like figures pulsating and hovering around the 2 adjacent beds, hovering and pulsating over my brother and his friend. There must have been at least 3 of these figures. The 3rd one stood over my bed, although this apparition didn't have any human-like features, except for maybe the shape of something human. I could feel like it was staring right at me. I decided then the only course of action was to turn over to face the wall and go to sleep. The morning after, I told my experiences to a few of my family members, and they joked that it might be witches that performed those rituals in the past, and generally didn't believe me. Except one person, my brother's girlfriend. She told me she experienced something as well. She was only sleeping next door, and she told me she felt like someone sat down on the end of her bed in the night and said she could feel the weight of someone on her legs, but nothing was there. Very frightened by this, I decided to read the guest book to see if anyone else reported anything else weird and unusual. But nothing of the sort was there. I'll never forget what I saw that night. And if you're ever up near the Black Isle, or stay in the same holiday home I did, just be aware of any strange figures entering your room at night.
Okay, so a little backstory first. I organised a trip to meet up with my parents in my dad's hometown of Dover, Kent, UK. We both live about 3/4 of an hour's drive from there. I have lots of fond memories of Dover, as my dad took me there a lot, as a child. However, we actually booked an Airbnb in the neighbouring town of Deal, as there was no availability in Dover. Me and my partner are driving down to Dover from Sheffield on a Friday night after work, getting dark almost as soon as we leave. We're about an hour away from our destination. I thought it would be nice to drive through Dover, so my girlfriend, who's not from the UK, can see the seafront and the castle, etc., opposed to driving straight through to Deal, where our Airbnb was. I told her to change the destination on our Google Maps route, which guided us off the main M2 motorway, a big 3-lane carriageway, to a 1-car wide trek with a tree tunnel. I began making jokes saying, "Where have you taken us? Why are we on this road?" etc. It was such a drastic change of scenery and definitely had creepy vibes. Very dark, as I mentioned, the tree tunnel. Anyway, we continue following this lane, when all of a sudden, I see a big white flutter in the top left of my vision, in the tree line. Being a bird enthusiast, and for the most part a non-believer, I immediately brush it off as a barn owl. I didn't get a good image of what it was that moved. All I remember is a white flash. As we were driving up this track, there were a few large, very spaced out houses, and then a business, Blue Bell Hill Physiotherapy, which gave me an indication of the area we were in. Before returning to normal, a well-lit A road, in which we rejoined the other motorway to take us to Dover. I didn't really think much of it at the time, other than it being a bit creepy due to the darkness in the tree tunnel and how we changed from a big motorway to an absolute track in an instant. Just as I changed my mind to drive through Dover instead of going straight to Deal, we could have detoured at any other time using any other road. We arrive at the Airbnb, check in, and get settled, and an hour or so later my parents arrive. All the generic catching up happens, as we haven't seen them in a while. And I get into the story of how the navigation took us up some track and I saw an owl. As my dad is from this area, he asked where the track was, and because of the physiotherapist, I replied, "Bluebell Hill?" He looks at me and laughs. "So you saw a white flash in the trees down some lane at Bluebell Hill?" And he told us he knew the exact area and the haunting that goes with it. When he was growing up, it was a well-known, ghosty sort of area. Famously, there was a car crash there in the 60s. This immediately made me think twice about the owl that I saw. Like I said, I just assumed it was an owl due to the fact that what else is hanging around in trees at night? I began Googling the area and found all sorts of paranormal experiences around there. The chances of me deciding to change route at the perfect time for the navigation to take us down this creepy road seemed pretty slim. Needless to say, I had trouble sleeping that night, and this experience was on my mind the entire trip.
So it was the night of my 29th birthday. I'd come back home to my parents' house to visit and have a night out with my school friends to celebrate. My mum was driving me to a friend's house first. It was about 6:30 p.m. and just starting to get dark, but still reasonably light. The area is quite rural, with a series of villages linked by a main road. The road is small but still busy, as it's the main link through the villages. We were heading to my friend's village, and was rounding a little bit of a corner in the road, when our headlights hit a young guy sat in the grass right on the edge of the road. We both jumped, and my mum slowed the car down. I immediately told her not to stop, as he might be up to no good, but instead called the non-emergency police number to inform them. The guy was young looking, with a bright, fluorescent almost, polo shirt on. He had blondish spiky hair and was half smiling. He had one knee up and his arm resting on it, and as we approached, he looked at the car and half smiled. This was a really wet day. The grass was long and he must have been soaking wet. He didn't look hurt or drunk, and just looked really chilled. Anyway, I called the police, explained what I'd seen and that I was concerned he would get hurt. My mum helped me with the description. The lady asked me where it was, and just kept commenting on how nice it was around the area. She also kept repeating, "Oh, how odd. Yes, very strange." She then said she would check to see if there were any more reports. By this point, I was at my friend's house, so I quickly explained to my friend and her boyfriend what had happened, and then we forgot about it and got on with our night. The next night, I was at a family party in the area, but had my 2-year-old with me, so I was just planning on saying hello to everyone and getting my son home to bed. I was stood chatting with 2 family friends, one of which had just retired as chief inspector in the local police force. I mentioned to her about having to call the police as I'd seen this lad. At this point, she went quiet and looked at me with a strange look on her face. I said, "What?" And she said, "You know I don't lie, don't you? which really piqued my interest. She then explained that for years they've had the exact call out. There's a man by the road to Burstwick. There's a man stood in the field next to the road to Burstwick. There's a man by the road and he's crying. She said she's been to look for him every time, but he's not there. At this point, my blood ran cold. The whole thing freaked me out as he was plain as day. I went to tell my mum, who had the same reaction. At this point, it was time to get my little boy home, so I had a very eerie drive home through the back roads in the dark. When I got home, I explained what she'd said to my friends in a group chat and asked if anyone had died there. This was my family friend's theory. My friend, who I'd been on my way to see that night, said yes. Her stepmother's nephew, who was also the father of a friend we went to school with. He died in a car crash there before she was born in 1990. I immediately asked for a picture. My friend sent one straight away. Now, I know there is room for error here, but this is what plays on my mind so much. It looked just like him. Same blonde spiky hair, same pointed chin, same eyes. At this point, I thought I needed to test this just a little. I sent the picture to my sister, who was still at the party, with no explanation but, show this to Mum and tell me what she says. My sister promptly texts back, saying, she said that's the guy we saw. At this point, there was no way I was going to sleep and just really wanted my family to come home. When they eventually came home, I ran down the stairs to speak to them about it. My mum had been chatting to people at the party who lived close to where we saw the man. She said someone else had seen him, I'm not sure when, as it was on the local Facebook Crime Watch type page. We found the post which said a couple had stopped the car as the young man proceeded to crawl across the road in front of them, and they were worried. He was wearing the same clothes we described. I should add at this point, there aren't really homeless people in the area as it's very rural. He also looked very well kept. So there it is. I know it's long, but if you get this far, thanks. I just can't get my head around it. People have been seeing him for years. Police go and never find him. He matches the picture. I don't know what else to think. Hello watchers and listeners. Thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. And a very big thank you to Jay Nightmares for joining me again on this one. Be sure to check out his channel too. He has a lot of great content. As always, thank you all so much for your continued support. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.